Hello, my name is Liza Maria, and today on my podcast, I'm glad to have as a guest Dr. Mindy Howard, which is an astronaut trainer, future astronaut, and TEDx speaker. Hello, Dr. Mindy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
That's great. So, to start this podcast, can you tell us about your background, like your career working with space?
Wow. Okay. Sure. Well, I've always had a dream to become an astronaut after watching a TV show that was popular when I was a kid called The $6 Million Man. Really cheesy TV show, but he was an astronaut, the $6 Million Man. And when I was in love with him, and I saw that, the idea of being an astronaut was what he was, and he was so cool. I wanted to do whatever he did. And I didn't really know at the time about, what it entailed to become an astronaut, but I remember sort of like imitating him from an early age, like, jumping out of trees to see if I could fly and run in slow motion like he did, like I was walking on the moon. And then when I got to be a teenager, I guess people were saying, well, what are you doing to become an astronaut? Like, and I didn't think about if that I had to do something. And I thought, oh, maybe I need to start thinking about this. So I was told, you should study math or science or in engineering. And I thought, okay, when I'm going to go to college, I'll think about, I'll become an engineer. And so uh, I decided to do my bachelor's in the States and my master's in the States. And I was ready to apply for NASA. And people said, well, it'd be better if you had a PhD. And I remember saying, like, okay, how long does that take? And someone said, well, only about 6 to 10 years here in the States. And I thought, whoa, that's a long time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Isn't there a shorter way to do this? And then they said, well, I heard if you go to the Netherlands or go to Europe in general, it typically takes only 4 years. And I thought, okay, I need to go somewhere where I can do it quicker. So I ended up going to the Netherlands and I did my PhD. I applied to NASA as soon as I got my degree. And I got pretty close on the NASA selection process, down to the last 200 people from the thousands. And that list was called highly qualified astronaut candidate. And these people, we were told that we were good enough to become astronauts, but then I didn't get selected to do the medical testing, which was the next step because it was a lottery. And my name didn't come up. And I was so disappointed. I got so close and it didn't happen, and kind of devastated, actually. And since I was in the Netherlands already, I thought, okay, maybe if I become Dutch, I could try to apply for the European Space Administration to become an astronaut. And that's actually what I did. So a year later, I applied to the European Space Administration. But then they said, sorry, we're not having any astronaut applications. And they wouldn't for another 10 years after that. And then when I was 38 years old, I applied and they said, sorry, we have an age limit of 37. And I remember thinking, my gosh, this is not easy to try to become an astronaut. I thought I was doing everything. And then this is a long story, but it's a good story. But anyway, so in the meantime, I was working for the oil industry. I was working for Royal Dutch Shell, and they had a big reorganization in 2010 after I had worked for them for about 17 years in a variety of different roles, like an engineering role, different roles. And then the last role I had was a sustainability manager in the company. And they said that if I agreed, because they were having this reorganization, if I agreed to leave earlier than other people, I would get some money, a lot of money. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And they said, and we'll also give you a training to help you secure your next job. What do you want to be? And I remember thinking, okay, I have to own up to my dream of becoming an astronaut. I've been putting it on hold for 17 years. So I looked at the career counselor and I said, what I want to do now is become an astronaut. And he looked at me and he was like, ha ha ha, very funny. What do you really want to do? And I said, no, this is exactly what I want to do. And he sent me to a training in the States at the NASTAR Center, where these people trained the Virgin Galactic astronauts. And these people I was noticing that not everybody was having an easy time in the centrifuge. Some people like me were kind of smiling while we were undergoing 6Gs, and other people had this look of like this, and we could see each other's faces. And I remember thinking about, hey, that's kind of interesting. People, not everybody's enjoying themselves, not everybody's having a good time, and some people are really scared. There must be a training to help people stay calm and focused for their space flight. And they said, no, that didn't exist. And I remember thinking, oh, that's something I could do. And I started the first and only mental preparedness training for commercial astronauts called Inner Space Training. And then I'm getting to kind of like the ending of the story, but it's a long story. But nonetheless, I started to train people who wanted to become commercial or to be, who either bought a ticket or who were planning on buying a ticket on Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin. And in 2017, I did a TED Talk to try to tell people what I was doing. And I thought maybe I would get discovered, and yeah, and who knows? In 2018, I was actually discovered. Someone said, I saw your TED Talk and I see you're training astronauts. We are having a competition, and the winners of the competition are going to win a space flight. Are you interested in training us and coming with us to space? And I remember just sort of like hearing this as a phone call, like, did this person just ask me to go to space? So I was so excited. I said, yes, of course. And I was contracted to train these people. And we were scheduled to go in 2023. But what happened was the pandemic. So this whole thing kind of fell through. I was really kind of disappointed. But in the meantime, I had told people that, this flight's going to be happening. And the Netherlands is a very small place. The word got out that I could potentially be the first Dutch female astronaut, because I got a second passport, and that I could be the first Dutch female astronaut going to space. And I was invited on talk shows and radio shows. Actually, the Royal Dutch Mint, the people who make the coins for different currencies, had heard about it, and they contacted me and they said they wanted to make a coin, which was the first Dutch woman to go to space coin. And I thought, oh my God, that's so cool. But I don't know when I'm going to space now, because this group is not happening. So I said to them, perhaps we could change the theme of that coin to the Women to Space coin, to try to bring awareness to the fact that most countries don't have a woman that has gone to space and representing them. Why don't we sort of like have this coin to bring about that awareness? And so they agreed to that. And that coin came out in October of last year. And then I thought, okay, now that we have a coin, what are we going to do with it? How do we get more women to space? How do we get more girls into space? And then the idea of Cosmic Girls Foundation came to me, that exactly what we're doing. And we can talk about that in a second. But anyway, that's kind of like my weird space career, going from first trying the traditional way via a NASA ESA astronaut, and then going in a very untraditional way, and then all of a sudden trying to get other people, also other girls, to get into space. So a bit of a roundabout way, and hopefully I can go with the winning Cosmic Girl when this happens. So we'll see.
Well, I think that's really interesting. And as you mentioned, you have your own projects as well. So can you tell us some of your projects you're working on for your foundation called Cosmic Girls?
Right. Well, essentially, Cosmic Girls has several kind of sub-projects underneath it. Sort of the biggest, most well-known project that we're doing is the 6 Girls, 6 Continents competition, where girls between the ages of 14 and 19 can apply. Right now, it opened in October, and girls will have probably about 6 months where they can enter this competition. We're trying to get the word out so that girls all over the world, all continents and places maybe less well known than others, can join us to sign up for the competition. And all girls who enter the competition will get skilled in STEM skills, astronaut training skills, and key life skills. And so the way we're doing that is through our international program partners. And these program partners, the girls will sign up for a particular partner. Some partners are teaching like basic skills, maybe physics and math, and how to sort of beef up your skills in that area. And others are a bit more advanced that are actually taking those physics and math and teaching girls how to become rocket scientists and how to launch their own rockets. So where there's different skill levels and different things that you can do by joining a partner. And just because you're in, let's say South America doesn't mean you can't join a partner in Africa or North America. You don't have to join a partner in your own region, because most of these partnerships or these programs are online. But anyway, so the girls get together, they join this online program, they learn these skills, and then one girl from each continent will become a finalist. And these finalists, the 6 finalists, will get astronaut training, the commercial astronaut training, which is a parabolic flight, inner space training, the mental preparedness training, and then a centrifuge. And that is a way that we're going to be training up the girls. And then one winner will actually win a suborbital space flight. So it's super exciting. So in order to make this all happen for Cosmic Girls, we're doing things like fundraising, for example, something, we need to go and buy tickets for space. We need to go and, buy these astronaut training programs, girls. We're flying people around the world. So like all of this has costs. So that's one big part of the work I'm doing. Also working on, like, for the girls, giving them webinars that they can listen to and connect to. But we're also we're trying to lower the threshold and make things less scary for girls to kind of dare to lean into this idea of learning more about STEM and space. And we're trying to help them along the way. So we're giving them experiences, some more easier than others. And that involves also marketing a lot of the stuff that we're doing, in social media, and for example, also this documentary that we'd like to do, which once we're training the girls and then we have the winning finalist, we want to kind of, document this whole thing so that girls all over the world can see this, for example, on a Netflix documentary. So there's so many different components in making this all happen. And I guess as the CEO, I got my hands in all of it. Thank God I have a lot of help with the people in our team who are volunteering to help with marketing and fundraising and, engaging the girls in our Cosmic Forum. But all of these moving parts have to be managed. So there's a lot of things that kind of go on in the background to make it all happen. So those are the projects I'm mainly working on.
Yeah, and also one of the questions is, as a future astronaut, how do you train? Because I know for many astronauts, training is also like 0G flights, or some of them are also going with flying jets and all that. But how was your training?
Right. So it depends what you're going to be doing in space and if you're going orbital or suborbital, because if you're going orbital, obviously you need to learn how to use the toilet. You need to learn how to eat in space. You need to learn a lot of things about the systems of the spacecraft, where you'll be on. And if you're flying on a shorter flight, on a suborbital flight that takes only maybe 90 minutes or 11 minutes, depending if you're flying Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin, and you're much more of a passenger, except for those 4 minutes when you have your weightlessness period. You don't need to train as much. These orbital flights will have, for example, underwater training if you're learning how to go and use the robotic arm outside of a space station, and that takes hours and hours and hours of practice. People who are just really going on these shorter term suborbital flights really need to have an understanding and to feel good about, first of all, their mental preparedness, their mental resilience, and that they understand what they need to do and they're not afraid to do it, in terms of executing their mission, but also what happens, and they have to feel equipped if other people on their flight might be doing something that gets in their way. What's going to happen? How are they going to react? So that mental training is extremely important, both for suborbital and orbital missions, but especially these short flights where, it's like roller coaster, like high G forces happening as you're launching. And then you're all of a sudden have to switch to the 4 minutes of weightlessness, and then you're back on the roller coaster trying to sort of breathe properly so you don't pass out. You need to be able to control yourself and know how you're going to deal with it if other people get in your way. So this mental aspect is extremely important. Then you have the actual 4 minutes of weightlessness where you are training, for example, on how to navigate in zero G. And in fact, you're correct. It's called a parabolic flight, but these zero G flights are, shaped in a parabola where you get about 22 seconds of weightlessness when you are practicing. And then that happens like 15 times, 15 parabolas. So it's kind of nauseating. They don't call it the vomit comet for nothing, because it is pretty crazy and getting used to those G forces, and the zero G, and going from, when you're accelerating to all of a sudden you're going over the top of the parabola, and that's when you're able to float for 22 seconds and learn how to maneuver. Like, how do you go from point A to point B? That's what you learn in one of these parabolic flights, zero G flights. And then the centrifuge is what is important to know how your body reacts when you're under high gravity, high G forces. So when you're taking off, for example, all the blood is rushing to your feet. It feels like you're being pushed down into your chair, and your blood is going to your feet. And if you don't kind of counteract that with a breathing maneuver where you're pushing the blood back up into your head, there's a good chance you'll pass out and you'll miss, a piece of your flight, which would be a shame. So you need to realize, like, how do you react when these G forces are happening? As I was doing this training that I did in the NASTAR Center, I had no problem. I didn't, I felt being pushed into my seat, but I didn't feel like I was going to pass out. But I think also they say short people, small women, and people with a shorter neck have an easier time than people who are tall with a longer neck, because your heart is here. And if your head is all the way up here, that's a big distance that the heart has to pump against the gravity, the blood up to the head. And if it's a shorter distance and a shorter neck, it's an easier time to do that. So because I'm small, I had no problems, but it's good to know that ahead of time and to practice that, so you're not surprised when all of a sudden you're in a space flight and then all of a sudden you pass out. So it really makes sense to do what I call the trifecta of commercial astronaut training. But the stuff like the underwater training, and other types of cave training, that's what the ESA and the NASA astronauts do. That is not essential for commercial astronauts who are going for a shorter time period. So that there's lots of different trainings you can do. You can do that training, that fighter pilot, the fighter jet training or experience where you're sitting and feeling the G forces, can be also simulated in a centrifuge. So it's not necessary to do that training, but it's cool. And if you have the money, why not? But you could simulate that in a centrifuge, essentially.
Yeah, and one of the things that the viewers might want to ask you while they listen to this podcast is, what made you become a space enthusiast? Like, is there a story behind this?
Well, I mean, it was always that will to be wanting to be an astronaut, and I guess that's where my enthusiasm came, and I was pretty much focused on that's how you get into the space industry, and never knew until years later that there's astronauts are kind of like on top of the pyramid, where we see these people and we say, oh, this is what space focuses around, what these people are experiencing. But there's a whole pyramid underneath them that is, the astrophysicists, everybody else in NASA or ESA or wherever they're working, that is needed to kind of sort of make it all happen for the astronauts. The astronauts are just the ones that we see often. And so I didn't realize how so many aspects like of biology and all these other subjects that I hadn't thought about. It could have been other ways for me to get into the space industry. I was really focused on the astronaut side and not necessarily thinking about other things. For me, the idea, I think of not necessarily being behind a desk and having your office be, whether you're training in a pool or whether it was training in a parabolic flight. Obviously, there is a lot of office work, but I think my romanticized version of being an astronaut, of, having never a day which is the same as the next day, and being able to fly around sounded pretty cool. So for me, the idea of zero gravity was what was really attracting me. I think initially just, that idea and being able to do lots of different things during the day, and not being behind a desk. That excited me at the time, but I now see that space is much bigger than what originally attracted me, about it. So I think that was kind of it. So it was really sort of my future career. That's what I was focused on. And I've always had a fascination of the moon. Those two things fascinated me. Mars never did anything for me. I never felt like I had a drive to want to go to Mars at all. And maybe it was also because of the times. Back in the day when I was younger, there was a lot less talk about Mars than there is now. But I was focused always, because the moon is there. You see it all the time, and I was fascinated, and I still am fascinated about the moon. So I don't know, that I guess those two reasons made me a space enthusiast.
That's really cool. And what are some of your projects you're working on these days?
Well, I'm also a director of inner space training for Blue Abyss. They are creating a facility in Ohio and in the UK and in other places in the world to train astronauts. So I'm really happy to be kind of associated with them when their facility gets built. I hope to be also, working with them much more than now. So that's one of the projects I'm working on, as well as the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs has a group called Space for Women. And in that group, this Space for Women group, it's really interesting if you check out the website. But they're also they have the same mission almost as Cosmic Girls, actually. And we want to be supporting them hopefully in the future, maybe with a partnership. And trying to make that partnership happen is what I'm busy with right now. But I've also been a mentor for UNOSA for the Space for Women project, where I get a chance to get a couple girls assigned to me per year. We have a mentor-mentee relationship, which is kind of cool. Yeah, sort of seeing how the girls are, what are issues that they're facing, and it helps keep kind of my eyes on the pulse, my finger on the pulse for what's going on with the younger people entering the field, the field of space. So those are some of the projects I'm working on.
And I was wondering, have you ever thought of having events related to space or talks about space during your career, like maybe in Netherlands or other countries?
Well, I do participate in like panel sessions. For example, this Friday, I'm going to be there. There's an education session, for example, about we're talking about closing the dream gap, how to get more girls to become astronauts. We're having a webinar where it's an event that people can join online, where we're talking about what is the dream gap and how girls seem to get their dreams crushed more than boys do, based on often how, society treats girls, and what we can do, like Cosmic Girls Foundation, to try to help address the dream gap. So, and to close the dream gap. So those are kind of events that I'm doing, but I also do give public speaking talks in the Netherlands or not just the Netherlands. Typically it's been in Europe, for corporate, companies that say we want to have an away day, or we're having an event and they're looking for a motivational speaker. My story of becoming an astronaut is what I talk about, and all of the ups and downs, and mainly the downs, because that has been my career. Like, I've been trying stuff and getting very close, but then it hasn't happened, and trying something else and getting very close, but then it hasn't happened, and getting up and trying. And I've been doing that now for a long time. I think sometimes the story of getting up after falling down over and over and over is actually more inspirational to people, because they recognize that, than just saying, oh, I had a dream and I accomplished it and I'm done. Like, it happened pretty easily. I think the struggle of trying to get somewhere big is something that people, like to hear. That's why it is motivational, because I've been having this dream for 50 years, ah, long time. And I believe it's going to happen, but it's taken an awful long time to happen. But I'm still trying, and I'm not giving up, and it will happen. And I'm hoping I'm very close, as a matter of fact. It will be triumphant when it happens after all of this time. So I think, yeah, I do give these kinds of talks if people are interested.
And my last question here is, as a TEDx speaker and a future astronaut, what's your advice for space fans or let's say young people?
Well, in Cosmic Girls, we say that, we're equipping girls with three skill sets to become an astronaut or be successful in the aerospace world or in any career, actually. And that's the STEM skills, the key life skills, and I would say the astronaut training skills. And when I say key life skills, we're talking about mental resilience and communication. And what I also would call is badassiness, to be a badass, and to just, don't let people shake you or shake you from your dream. And I think personally that badassiness and that, mental resilience that you need, and the persistence to pursuing your dream and being unflappable is probably the most important aspects that you need, even more than all the technical skills that are very much important. But it's really, it's not something that happens overnight. And if I didn't have that mental resilience, I think, I would have dropped out a long time ago. And unfortunately, that's what we see for a lot of people, who give up on their dreams. So that for me, is something extremely important and can be trained. So it's like, even if you say, oh, I don't have this, or I'm not really good at this, you can learn this. So it's really important, and not to give up, and say, you can get trained to help you learn these things. So I would say, just because you don't have the skills yet doesn't mean you can't get it if you don't want to get it, if you don't want to learn. It's possible to learn.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mindy, for joining me here today. And it was absolutely a pleasure talking with you.
Same here. It's been a pleasure.